Okay, all right, so my demo's done. So now we'll have Dave do his demo on Google dorking. Take it away.
All right, cool. So this is about Google dorking. I've given, I put together some slides here so we can kind of have more of an idea. So general ideas, advanced search functions using a Google search engine and the interesting results you can pull back. So Google dorking has been around for a really long time. I think as far back as like 2002 to 2001 by a researcher named Johnny Long. That discovered that with Google dorking, you're essentially using advanced search operators in the Google search engine, or we could extend this to other search engines to locate specific information. Let's talk about a real world example. So in 2016, a cyber attack by suspected nation state hackers gained control of a water dam in New York using Google dorks. They were able to find some default passwords for the interface and able to find the interface just by using a Google search engine. So Google dorking is readily available and has been used by hackers for many years to identify vulnerabilities and sensitive information accessible on the net. A lot of this information has started to be collected and is collated here in the Google hacking database. So I just kind of want to show that real quick. So there's a lot of interesting information in here. And you can search for things, like webcams, right? Maybe try to find like security cameras or other things like that. You could look for passwords, and you might be able to find, indexes of passwords, right? And Exploitdb is kind of, I believe that it's hosted and maintained by Offensive Security, the people that make Kali Linux. So, there's exploits, which we're probably all familiar with, and papers, and then there's the Google hacking database. Okay, so that kind of covers that. This is a really great site if you want to kind of dig a little deeper into this topic. So let's kind of talk a little about why is this possible? So Google, being a search engine, is a full text search engine, right? So it indexes whole pages instead of titles and descriptions, and things like Bing and Baidu and Yandex, and so some of those are other search engines. Bing is being Microsoft's, and Baidu is a Chinese search engine. Yandex is a Russian search engine, and they kind of all do the same kind of thing, like Yahoo, all of them, DuckDuckGo. And so what you're doing is when you're searching, you're searching by terms, and these two terms are Boolean by default, right? So you can go and or and a not, and you can use operators with that. Right. So when you're typing your questions into Google, you're really typing in Boolean search queries that is looking through the page and seeing what text is kind of matching that, right, by what's indexed by Google. But we can use more specific keyword searches in parts of the web page or the URL or URI using very special syntax words, right? So let's talk a little about the formula of that. Okay. So the basic idea for the formula here is in title, right? So that's our operator. And we could also have an operator of like in URL. So we're saying, operator, I want you to look specifically for login page, right? So this tells the, this instructs the search engine, in this case, to look for login page in the title of the page, right? Or we could say in URL, and then we're looking for login page specifically in the URL. Or if we said in text, then instead of looking at the title of the page, we would be looking for what's in the actual body of the page, right? So the idea here is syntax, right? So you have the operator, so what the operator applies to. So your general idea is that you would have, here's your first operator, what I want you to specifically search for, and then other operators to kind of extend that, right? So if we look back here, they're saying in text, index of, and then their operator would then be passwords .xlsx, right? So you can be very specific about what you're trying to pull back. And then we could also define it a little more. Like, so we're saying in title login page for things that are specific, that have like a question mark, right? So a lot of pages, when you go and you look at them, like PHP, for example, it'll have those different kinds of like operators at the end that have like the question mark based on the way that the URL is made. And then we could also look for things more specifically like TXT, PDF, or MP3, right? So like when I'm taking classes at my university, right, I might say for a question that I have for class, right, in text, then in quotes, what I'm specifically looking for, and then I'll say file type : PDF, and hopefully I'll pull back something that's more specific, right? So we can locate, very specific information, right? So we kind of talked a little about this. And here's a few more examples, right? So you can, and here are some very common search operators that you'll find in the hacking database and in other places, because there's correlated like GISTs and stuff on GitHub. So in text, and then the query, and then in URL, the query. And this searches for specific URL text in URL login page. And then you can extend that even further. So at the end of the line, you would say in text what you're looking for, and then you would add another operator, so related. So this is going to pull back pages related to your term. Info, so supplemental information that Google might have on that page. Link, so find other pages indexed by Google that reference that link. So maybe like an href tag or something like that that's in the actual code of the page. And then quote, so we're finding something by an exact phrase. And this operator specifically becomes very important as we're trying to pull back very specific information out of Google. So let's kind of look at that, right? So I'm a hacker and I want to find some information on Google. So I'll go login, and then a wildcard. So anything with login, and then anything with password and file type XLS. So let's kind of just pull that in. We'll hit search. Cool. And so we see a lot of information has been pulled back. So let's kind of look at the first one here. And hopefully this one loads. And if it doesn't, I'll pull another one so that we can kind of look at it. All right, cool. So this looks to be some kind of New York school, right? And Blackboard, that's kind of the tag that you might see for a Blackboard page. And right here, so we see some software and what their logins are, and then options of what their passwords are, and then the license, and then the student's login. This is really bad, and this looks to be like an unfinished spreadsheet, right? This shouldn't be hosted out on the internet. You shouldn't be able to pull back that information, but we can. And so let's try to run the query again, because there's another one in there that I kind of wanted to show. Copy. Yeah, and so like as I'm thinking about this, right? This is all passive. This is indexable on Google, so this is like open and in public domain, right? And so that's lost context. So some of these operators work and some of them don't. But as you're thinking about it, right, from an attacker's point of view, this is less noisy than, say, running a port scan to try to map what an organization looks like. This is a way that you can get a footprint of what an organization looks like, or the information that they're spilling, just through what's searchable on the internet, right? So here's one where we can find webcams. So let's try to pull that up. And why am I just dumping these into Google? Well, just to kind of show you why this is bad, right? Like how would an attacker go about approaching me, trying to break into something? So here's a webcam, and that one doesn't really pull up, but we can pull back another one. Yeah, so right here, right? Like this is a live view of somebody's computer lab. This is probably some kind of university, and all that found was, it was just looking for what's in the webcam for the HTML, let's pull another one, because I don't like to really linger on those pages. It's just kind of interesting to find them, but it kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies thinking about like what information have I exposed out there. So here's some Panasonic management systems, right? So let's kind of look at that. And how did we find that query? Well, this is specifically what a Panasonic web URL would look like for the web console. And right here, you know, this is somebody's shop. So now that we know what this URL is, we could pull that URL back, and then we could go to something like Shodan, which is like a search engine that kind of correlates IP addresses. And then we could start to try to pull back more specifically, you know, where is this located, right? Where is this place at? And if I was, you know, so inclined, I might try to search out, and that's not going to pull back anything because we actually need to do a DNS query to pull it back. But that's just the general idea, right? Like if we could associate with this IP address, what this IP address is, we could find the IP address in Shodan, and then we could figure out where this is. And, you know, we can click in a little further, and we can actually see more specifically about the camera, right? So we could watch this camera if we knew what the IP address is, and we could find it. And somebody has locked these. So that's good, right? They're using their camera technology appropriately. Little frightening, but that's kind of where it is. And so if you search through a lot of things, you're going to end up finding like car parks, security cameras, colleges, bars, slopes, etc., banks. Not great. And so here's another one. So a lot of popular home internet routers have the ability for you to manage your routers through the internet. Well, okay, that's great, but what if I can get to them? And so here we go. So right here is a D-Link router that's sitting out on the internet. And right here, we can start to figure out what type of router it is. And it even says what type of router it is. So, you know, being red teamers, we could take, you know, the rocku.txt list. We could do a slow Hydra attack, trying to brute force these fields to gain access to this router. And now that we know what the IP address of that router is, we can pop that into Shodan and hopefully get back some geographic information about it, right? If it's available. It might not be, but yeah, it is. So now we know that this is sitting in Poland, and this is the same page. And so if we pull that back, that's the same thing that we pulled back from our Google search. So right there, now we've correlated where this place specifically is, and we could start thinking more about it. So if we were planning an attack, we might be able to take what that router login page is and pull it back. So as an organization, we shouldn't be leaking that information. If I can pull that back, so can people who you know, might want to do harm to us, you know, do bad things. What those bad things are, I can't really, you know, think about because you know, I'm just a guy who likes Google. But you know, and so here we are. Here's some like DDWRT routers, and that's a very popular firmware that people like to load onto other routers to give themselves more information. But right here, you know, this has access for me to see what your WAN IP is and what your internal LAN IP is. So now I can start to think about what the network range of where you're at is. And if I pop this into Shodan, you know, I can start to track where that is. Okay, so sitting in Slovenia, sitting in the city of Ljubljanica. And it looks like you also have some SSH that's set up on here. So definitely not good that that's being exposed, but we can kind of find some more of that information, right? And here's another one. So Cisco has the ability for you to, Cisco routers have the ability for you to store what your router configurations are in a text file that you can pull back later for review. Okay, well, what if some of that is leaking? So right here we have, you know, columbia.edu, and if we click on it, right here, so it says this is their router configuration, and maybe this is for their lab, maybe this is for a class, I don't know, but this is leaking the IP information internally of what that router looks like. And now I know specifically we would be looking for like, what is your password and what is this? What is the hash that you've used to store that password on your router? And now that we have that, we can start kind of mapping a little bit more about what that router might be doing. And here's another one. So it looks like a couple of these universities are leaking their router configurations out. And so fredshack.com, they also have their router configuration, but maybe fredshacks.com is just like, you know, a place where you can go and learn router configurations. I don't know, but the information is leaking here. So definitely not good that's occurring, but it is. And this is all because Google is indexing these pages. So here's another one, right? Like we might, as thinking as an attacker, or if we were doing a red team engagement for a company, one of the things that would be good is to attack something before it's finished being set up, so that we can start injecting our own tools, our own payloads into it. And so in this case, this is a WordPress setup that is not complete. So if we click on this transform mice, so it looks like their WordPress configuration PHP exists, but you can reset it by deleting it first. And if we scroll down a little more, we see our database name, the username, password, and the database host. Not good. I don't know what you could do with this, but conceivably you could point the database to you know, something that you're hosting in AWS. So you can start pulling that information back. And it looks like here, you know, you can start running PHP commands manually to the WordPress. Really not a good idea. I'm not going to click any further, and I'll explain why you don't want to click further for things like that much later. I think the general idea that everybody could probably pick up on that is you don't have permission to click any further, but I have permission given that this stuff is sitting out on the internet. So this one, so this is finding login portals. I forgot to change this. So with this hyphen here, we're actually saying don't look for edu, don't look for mil, and don't look for .gov. Why? Well, I personally wouldn't want to search for those kinds of things because those are, you know, important organizations. But maybe I'm specifically trying to target extranet logins that are not, you know, edu and mil and gov. I just didn't type that slide correctly. So right here, so we can click on this one, and we can see this is a Volkswagen dealership login. It looks like some kind of financial services, right? So we've got a forgot password and we've got a line here. So I could start trying to social engineer my way into this extranet login to try to get some dealer credit. Maybe I'm trying to buy a car. Maybe I can get myself a car at a much lower rate. And here's like a student login page for what looks to be a flight school, and for Frontier, and so on, right? And like Victoria Credit, Phoenix Contact, Charlotte Pipe login, you know. And so if we look at it, you know, this one actually has the ability for us to register it. So we can maybe go get ourselves a burner phone and start trying to sign up for this, or use some kind of web service. And here's another login. So, you know, again, we could try to maybe start brute forcing our way in. And I'll just kind of run through the rest of these because I don't want to take over anybody else's time. So some change password portals using .asp pages. So let's kind of see what we can pull up there. And right here, so we've got what looks to be some change password pages. So let's click on the University of Urbana-Champaign. So if we knew our username and we knew our password, we could start changing the password. So we could maybe try to gain ourselves a new account, or some more information depending on what we're trying to do here. And then with this specifically, right, like this is talking about the change password. So this is walking us through how we would get a new password for whatever this service is, AV Connect. So given this information, we might be able to plan a next stage of our attack, right? So why are we doing this? Well, this is the kind of thing that you might want to do in recon, right? So let's look here. So find configuration, web pages hosted on FTP servers for download, right? So a lot of people might have web pages that they're currently developing that they want available. So in this case, I'm saying file type first. I'm looking for config. In the URL, I'm saying I want to look for all your web configs. And in your URL, I also want your FTP. So paste and search. And all of these terms I either got from the Google hacking database or I found them on GIST. So right here is an FTP cpca.gov environment web config. Probably they should have a password on it. All right, well, they do or they don't. So if I click on it, you know, if nothing is happening, that usually means that like no pages are coming. But if I had the ability to go grab those FTPs, I might be able to pull back more information about what their web configurations look like. Okay, so that's all well and good, but this takes a long time to do. And if you start typing these search queries like this, Google after a while will throw up a CAPTCHA for you. But there's a way around that, and there's a way to scale this out. So you can use Python, right, to grab all of the Google hacking database entries that are stored here. And you could store them in a dictionary with JSON and then send requests using the request library to Google. Okay, but if you do that and you do that enough times, Google is going to start blocking you because they're going to think you're a bot. Because there's a lot of types of malware that have been developed and attack tools that do use Google queries. And there are legitimate tools too that will do this, like some search engine optimization research tools. But anyway, so what you would need to do is you would need to route your traffic through a bank of proxies in a round robin way to delay getting a HTTP 429 error. And you would need to set up some timing to help with this effort. So you could use like proxy chains and setting up some SOX proxies. So really quick, I found this GitHub Python program that I haven't really had a whole lot of time to start playing around with. But this kind of does that, right? So it's called Pego Godot, made by OSCP. And so what it does is it essentially does exactly what I was talking about, right? And so you would install proxy chains and you would edit the proxy chains configuration. And so proxy chains is a way in Kali Linux and in other Debian-based systems that you can start routing your traffic through different proxies. So in their code, they kind of do exactly what I was talking about, where they go out and they pull down a dictionary of the different search queries, and they store it in a dictionary. And they parse it so you can start sending requests to Google to pull that information back in a more specific way. And that's all controlled by this pego.py. So you could automate that. And then you could also expand that, right? So a lot of these techniques work for other search engines like DuckDuckGo, Yandex, and Bing. But not all the search operators that we've talked about here will cross into those search engines, but many will. So you could expand this even further, right? So we could take those results that we're pulling back and we could get ourselves a Shodan API key. And we could start feeding the results back. Maybe we do some DNS resolution and we feed in the IP addresses, or we feed in specific information here. Like let's just say, power plants, and you know, Shodan through the API will process your requests, and then you'll pull them back. And you know, these pages here probably resolve to some kind of power plant, right? So if we click on it specifically, Bellark, Open Garden Gate, you know, something like that. I have no idea what this is, but you know, we're looking for specific things that it's saying, hey, do you resolve to power plants? You know, and so we could take what we pulled from Google and feed it back into Shodan, and Shodan might be able to pull some more information back for us in an automated way, so we can get that geolocation, right? So why would you want to do this? You would want to do this for good, right? So you could see what the footprint of your organization is online, right? Are you leaking anything? but with that, if you can find it on a search engine, that is public domain, but you can do no further than say like maybe beyond clicking on a link in a search result could be a crime, right? So if you try to like actually brute force those pages or anything like that, obviously you're committing crime, right? So you can't do that, but I can click on the links and that's just fine because I can pull it back through Google. So it's just a search. So permission in writing, right? You want to always have permission if you're trying to do something like, hacking wise for, red team engagements or anything like that. And probably permission before maybe you started doing this for your organization. But this is all passive, right? This isn't going to register any unusual traffic in terms of what you're trying to search for. So here are some of the sources that I pulled that from. These are definitely good places for you to go to if you want to learn some more about how Google dorking and how these kinds of things work. Here's some gists. Typically, there'll be new, fresh dorks that come out all the time on things like Pastebin, Hastebin, or gists on GitHub. Okay, so with that, that's the end of my presentation. Are there any questions? If there aren't any questions, I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, you can stop sharing, but this is awesome, but really scary as well. One quick one though was, I think when you did the login and password, you use that star notation. Does that work? Does that work as a wildcard for the search?
Yeah, exactly. So it'll either work as a wildcard for the search, but if you put it in double quotes, then it won't. The double quotes
good to know.
mean it's an exact search. But yeah, exactly. A wildcard will kind of work in the same kind of idea as you would think of the wildcard regular expression for other things. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, very cool. So we're running out of time now. So I wanted to quickly just share the reference that I use, right? So this was the webpage I used for the lateral movement stuff. And this was the MSDN page for the different code stuff. I thought this went really well. And, I'm hoping to do more of these in the future.